Almost at the very end, we're here with episode 7, The North. Spoilers ahead, obviously, as always. And let's get started with Zuko, because the Zuko side of the story is very minimal so far, and it's nothing much worth noting on. I do like that we instantly do see the loyalty on Zuko's crew from the guy who's been having a little bit of like a hissy fit with Zuko over the entire season. He's now immediately coming running, saying, hey, you're about to be arrested by the Imperial Guard, causing Zuko to run away. That really does show the loyalty that we ended on last episode when they understood that, hey, the only reason we're alive is because Zuko actually, deep down, a good guy who has heart and feelings for the individual soldiers fighting this war. That is then what ends up leading into Zuko getting blown up, the attempted assassination, of course orchestrated by Zhao. There's no pirates to do it this time, so he set this up to get Zuko onto a boat which was rigged with explosives, blow it up. He just got overboard in time, swimming away from it. Nothing too important. What I do want to point out is that Azula still is doing her firebending test with her orange fire. Surely next episode we're gonna work towards a point where her fire just permanently changes to blue. We've seen flashes of blue. There's still no real working toward that. The only thing that we've really seen in this episode now is that she's generating lightning and showing, hey, I can actually do like zappy interesting shit with firebending because lightning generation is a high tier move. I was expecting there for a moment to have a small fight between Azula and Ozai, because they're like, choose your opponent, and she's like, no. And I was like, oh, she's gonna choose Ozai. She's gonna choose Ozai. She's gonna fight her dad. And she didn't. She just refused to play his games, as she says, because she recognizes that all that he is doing is not giving her approval, so that she keeps pushing herself to higher and higher heights, seeing how far she can go. And that's kind of what I've been getting so far, but I don't think it comes across very well. So now he's agreeing to let her go into the open wide world to prove what she can do. And I suppose that'll play into the next episode, and hopefully in some way, shape or form that will unlock her permanently blue firebending. I don't know, okay? I'm not a huge fan of the Azula inclusion so far. I'm going to be real with you. But I also do still think that there might be a chance at some point down the line Azula is going to try at least to like take power from her dad. And maybe she won't succeed in doing that, so Ozai will still be the big bad final boss, but it will prove to Ozai that she has what Zuko doesn't, and that is the drive to, I don't know exactly the quote anymore, but what he said in the flashback to Zuko, where the weak make a place for the strong, right? If Azula believes that she is strong or stronger than himself, the drive to take that place, showing that might be actually valuable to show Ozai that she is the better heir to the throne. Maybe that's what's going on. I do feel a lot of tension in that relationship that is not usually there, and that better be building up to some kind of confrontation or some kind of event that's also usually not there. Because usually they're kind of very, very aligned in a lot of things. That's everything I have to say about the Fire Nation side of this episode. The majority of the episode is to do with Aang and the Northern Water Tribe. So let's get into Paku, because that's the thing we've all been waiting for. Sokka has been made less sexist. So is the Water Tribe itself also less sexist? And the answer is no, it is not. Which is kind of nice, because otherwise there would be no conflicts here. We'll get back to that in a bit. I've got a couple of notes here lined up back to back about that. But first, Yue is a waterbender, which makes perfect sense, actually, because moon spirits. Obviously, she would be able to waterbend, right? The interesting thing is, in this episode, we only see her doing one waterbending move, and it is pulling up a little bit of ice cream, or like freezing the milk and pulling it up to make an ice cream dessert. I'm really curious because over the years, people have pointed out that in the live, oh, not the live action, in the animated version, when we do the whole like Aang, Godzilla, ocean spirits thing, he only ever pushes water with that. So now my question is, because that is the ocean, that is the push part of push and pull, are the creators of this series in tune enough to realize that and make Yoei only be able to pull in her waterbending? Because that would be fantastic. The fact that they gave her waterbending is a good start, but now I actually want to see if they, pun intended, pull through and realize the potential that they have here for that storytelling. And I don't even want them to say that. I don't want them to say it out loud, and they've been really bad with not letting the viewer just come to their own conclusions. Media literacy, what even is it, right? Even if they draw attention to it because they want themselves to feel clever and everybody to know how clever they are, if they're clever enough to come up with the fact that she's a waterbender that can only pull water and not push water, that would be very, very interesting. And honestly, this is probably not going to happen, but I would be interested to see a fight scene with that, because how interesting of a technique would it be for a waterbender that can only pull water and not push it? That would lead to some very, very interesting moves. So I don't have my hopes up high for them to actually do that, but if they do, that would be awesome. So also, she's linked, well, she's not linked to, she is the fox spirit that Sokka saw in the spirit world, which, why is she a fox? I guess she wouldn't be furry bait if she was a fish in the spirit world, so that's probably why? I don't know. It's just US form in the spirit world is a fox with like a ring with the moon symbol on it, which is part of the reason that Sokka and her feel some kind of attraction toward each other, because they've met in the spirit world, which I actually quite like. I like that as an idea. I think it's a little bit forced, but I still like it as an idea. That also then explains why her arranged marriage has been broken up. So she still has an arranged marriage, but she at least has the prerogative to break it off, which she has done. And she has done that because she met Sokka in the spirit world. That is at least what is not even implied. That's like more or less explicitly stated. But I do like how all those things work into each other for this semi-new storyline that they're introducing here. While preparing for the battle, Aang is talking to the chief and Master Paku. And Master Paku is like, okay, are you going to spearhead this assault against the Fire Nation coming to our doorstep? And he's like, airbending isn't really about fighting. And he's like, yeah, okay, then just don't use airbending. You're the Avatar. Wait, you can only airbend. You can only airbend. You traveled halfway across the world and you didn't train knowing that there was going to be a battle here. Are you fucking dense? And I don't like to agree with Paku, but I kind of agree with Paku here. Aang hasn't shown any waterbending at all yet throughout this entire season. He didn't even practice with Katara's scrolls. He didn't even join Katara in practice. And that isn't even like, there's one moment where Katara's like, avoiding practice doesn't mean avoiding the responsibility. In like episode 2, and then it's never revisited again until this point. At which point, like the whole responsibility of protecting the world and avoiding that isn't even really linked to this or brought up in any way. So it feels really like cheap, and like there's no reason for him not to be training, because that's never been like a character arc or like a plot thread that they're working with here. It's brought up once, and then apparently they just drop it, and Aang doesn't train for what has to be at least weeks, potentially months of traveling throughout the entire world, from the south to the north. So that's a little bit weird. But we do also get to see the final Avatar in the whole cycle being contacted, unless you also count Yang Chen, but Aang himself is a air Avatar, so we've seen Avatars of all nations now. We contact Avatar Kuruk, and he's like, you can fix my issue, right? You can just like possess my body like Kyoshi did, fuck on the Fire Nation and we'll be fine. And it's actually really, really clever that they have Avatar Kuruk here in the north. They didn't do the world building to decide that would be here in the north, but it works out very well because canonically, if you've read the Kyoshi books, Avatar Kuruk is like really, really fucked because he fought dark spirits for pretty much his entire life, which was very short. I think he died at like 34 or something like that. He had a very short life because pretty much his body and his spirit were breaking down from fighting dark spirits. And that is brought into this show as well. And he's like, that is the reason that I can't do what Kyoshi did. Because I myself am no more able to control the Avatar state than you are, Aang. So the fact that they showed Kyoshi doing that was kind of going to be a problem, because now anytime you're around any Avatar-related shrine, they can just fix the issue for you. But the one place that they could really use that help is at a place where the Avatar shrine is Kuruk, which has a legitimately pre-established in other canon material reason not to be able to do that. And I honestly think that, again, they didn't like write the entire world building to support this like plot point, but they use it so well. And I honestly can't do anything else other than say mad respect for making that work, because that would have been a huge issue otherwise. Other than that, Kuruk just goes on to say, yeah, as the Avatar, you kind of just gotta be a bit of a loner because people around you are gonna get hurt otherwise. And all the Avatars have been saying this to him, and that's of course Aang's whole thing is like, no, I want to do this with my friends. I don't want to do this all on my own. And we know the whole thing. So the interesting bit is that we know that in the actual animated series, the final battle against Ozai, he does do on his own. So I don't know if we're building up to something different, but if we're building toward, I need to do this with my friends, and then he's like, oh, I need to do this alone. And by the end of this episode, he's maybe like, well, a little bit more, okay, I'll do it with my friends because that's what I want to do anyway. It's a little bit wishy-washy in that regard. And I don't know really what they're going for. And again, I'm starting to have doubts on how much planning there is for a season 2 and 3 here, because they're using like a lot of the highlights from the entire series in, at least in concepts, in this first season. So I kind of feel like the plan is just to do this first season, assume that the popularity isn't going to get to a point where a season 2 would even be viable, but they will have had, like Netflix will have had a huge amount of extra subscriptions for people watching this show, and Nickelodeon will have had the brand recognition boost that comes with this show coming out. And then over the next couple of years, there's a lot of new Avatar content coming out anyway, and then they'll just boost forward on that, and they won't need a season 2 or 3 for this show. I really am starting to feel like that is the strategy here, at least from Nickelodeon's part. I'm sure that Netflix would love a season 2 and a season 3. If this does well, that is. So I don't know. There could be a season 2 and 3, but I feel like the strategy is very much going all in on season 1 here, and then like potentially having stuff open for season 2 or 3, but I don't think season 2 and 3 are part of the plan at this point. Now that said, Aang actually sides because of that with Katara not being allowed to fight in the battle. So he kind of sides with Parku, but not because she is a woman, but because he doesn't want her to be in danger and distract him from the battle, which is a really interesting dynamic because it makes him kind of align with the wrong decision there for his own pretty good reasons. And that then also makes Sokka the only character around who is supportive of Katara fighting, and when she says, I'm going to challenge Master Parku to a fight, he's like, go kick his ass. And, man, only if, right? Only if Sokka had had a character arc starting with him being a sexist piece of shit and ending with him supporting Katara fighting for her right to be a warrior against a sexist piece of shit. Wouldn't that have been fucking amazing? In a lot of episode reviews, I've been pretty positive about the way they replaced Sokka's sexism with other stuff to make him have the same or similar character arc without resorting to that. I still don't think the reasoning for it was good, but I think they actually handled replacing those character flaws with other kind of scenes relatively well. But this moment being in there really makes me feel the lack of that initial Sokka sexism is a pretty big deal. Like, up until this point, they did very well, but this is a huge missed opportunity where they took an active decision to take something out, which is now undermining this scene to a certain extent, at least this scene's potential. Two somewhat unrelated notes that I just have at the bottom of my notes here is Yue just drops her entire backstory about the moon spirits in the middle of Aang meditating and Sokka walking in on them because they just needed to shove that exposition in somewhere, and clearly they didn't want it to be like a twist. And that's a common theme throughout this series, is that things that are twists in the original are just kind of information in this version of events, because again, the writers know that the people watching this already know the twists, so there's no reason to keep those twists at the end of episodes, at the end of stories, because they're not going to be twists. They're just going to be some information that needs to be told in case somebody who doesn't yet know it watches. But they don't have any power to them anymore as twists. But this one is particularly egregious, where it just gets shoved into the middle of an episode without really any cause to it. And I don't know. The Boomy one is a good example, right? They moved Boomy, his identity being revealed, or Aang recognizing him, to pretty much the start of that episode, so that the dynamic between Aang and Boomy could be something new and interesting that they could explore. And the lesson that Aang learns is a different and honestly a more apt lesson to learn for the morality of the story. I think that is done very well and takes advantage of the fact that, you know, if we can't use this as a twist, we might as well use it as like almost a character motivation kind of thing. And this is the exact opposite of that. It does not do that at all. It's just shoved into your face as some exposition in the middle of an episode. The other last note that I have on this episode is that Katara says, don't look to the past, don't look to the past avatars, think about the person who's going to be writing the legend of Aang, which is just saying, like, hype yourself up, right? I think this is a cute little Easter egg, which a lot of people are probably not going to get, because this is a name drop for the legend of Aang, and the legend of Aang is the name that Avatar The Last Airbender had in Europe, at least in a lot of European countries. So that must have been an intentional name drop reference there. There's nothing much more to that. I just caught that and thought that was interesting. So that's the second to last episode. We're going to be moving on to the last episode here. And this one was not as egregious as the last couple of episodes. Episode 5 and 6, I was not the hugest fan, especially episode 6. I don't think this is on the quality of episode 3 and 4 either, to be honest. But I think it is closer to being good than it is to annoying me. So altogether, I think we're heading in a good direction. And I mean, next episode we're gonna, we better have a giant spirit monster fish thing wrecking the Fire Nation. If we don't, I'm gonna be mad. But if we do, and surely we will, that episode, just by that fact, is going to be awesome. So I can't see how the next episode is going to be bad. I just cursed myself, I know.